By 2027, whispers about Burkina Faso's invisible dams could no longer stay hidden. A leaked UN report revealed that rainfall capture in the Sahel had mysteriously tripled, yet no new megadams were visible from space. The findings shocked world powers. How could one of Africa's poorest nations succeed where billion-dollar projects had failed? International media exploded with headlines. Burkina Faso hiding a secret water network. Traore's underground revolution. Western analysts accused Traore of playing with unsustainable science. Others feared the project masked military intentions. What if these underground vaults are not water, but weapon stockpiles? Speculated one European official. Meanwhile, ordinary Burkinabe were witnessing a miracle. Wells that once went dry in March now held water in June. Children in Ouagadougou went to school instead of spending half the day fetching water. Farmers in Manga grew maize where once only dust blew. For them, it wasn't politics, it was survival finally secured. But the global stage was restless. Neighboring states, still reliant on foreign aid, grew suspicious. Mali and Niger worried their own rivers would dry as Burkina Faso stole rain underground. France, whose companies had long profited from selling grain and bottled water in the region, warned of economic destabilization. And in Washington, some whispered of sanctions if Traore did not share data transparently. Yet the irony was clear. For decades, Africa had been told to depend on aid, to import grain, to lease land. Now that one of its smallest nations had found a way to feed and water itself, the same powers cried foul. Traore remained defiant. In a rare speech, he declared, "They called us poor because they owned our water. Today, we own our water. Tomorrow, we will own our future." For Burkinabe, his words rang true. The goat herders, the farmers, the women drawing from refilled wells, they knew the silent dams had changed everything. A new economy was forming: goat farming, vegetable exports, even cheese production from surplus milk. The soil was reviving, and with it, dignity. But beneath the hope lay an unspoken fear: what if the secret gets destroyed? Could the invisible reservoirs withstand sabotage? Could Burkina Faso resist the pressure of global giants? No one knew. But one truth was undeniable: in a world racing toward water wars, Burkina Faso had shown that survival did not always come from concrete megastructures or foreign aid, it could come from silence, from the ground beneath their feet. The world had mocked the idea of rabbits digging soil, goats flooding roads, and invisible dams storing water. But now, the joke was over. The future of Africa, and perhaps the world, might just depend on what Ibrahim Traoré had quietly begun. By late 2026, whispers about buried water became undeniable. Farmers in Ouagadougou swore they saw pipelines being laid under cover of night. In Dori, truck convoys moved with military escort, carrying what looked like filtration units. And satellite images revealed strange, geometric scars across the Sahel, patterns of canals and pits, later identified as subsurface dams. Unlike visible reservoirs, these dams didn't hold shimmering lakes. They trapped rainwater underground, beneath layers of clay and stone, shielded from evaporation and sabotage. While the surface looked barren, beneath lay hidden aquifers, quietly filling drop by drop. It was engineering disguised as silence. Traore called them the vaults of the nation. He believed Burkina Faso could not rely on visible water. It was too easy to poison, to drain, to seize. Hidden storage, however, could survive war, heat, and betrayal. To the world, it seemed absurd. To villagers watching their wells refill after months of dust, it was nothing short of resurrection. Grassroots movements began to blossom. In Yako, women's cooperatives trained in maintaining small sand dams. In Gawa, youth groups dug crescent-shaped bunds to catch rainwater for farming. NGOs once skeptical now admitted, the underground method reduced evaporation by up to 70%. Even international experts marveled. "This is not storage," one engineer remarked. "This is invisibility." But with innovation came resistance. Burkina Faso's elites, importers who profited from food scarcity, feared the dams would undermine their control. Foreign lenders warned of unsustainable debt from secret projects. Even neighboring states grew uneasy, whispering that Traore was hiding weapons under the soil. Still, on the ground, the revolution spread. Farmers in Kaya reported sorghum yields doubling. Villagers in Ziniar grew vegetables year-round, something unthinkable in the Sahel. For the first time in years, Burkinabe mothers weren't walking 10 kilometers for water. The dams had no towers, no gates, no grand openings, just quiet trenches that changed the fate of villages. What began as whispers of conspiracy had turned into a grassroots rebellion against thirst. Ordinary citizens, once dependent on charity and imports, were taking water back into their own hands. Yet the strategy was fragile. If the world found out the full scale of Traore's hidden reservoirs, would Burkina Faso face sanctions? Sabotage? In a desert where every drop meant life or death, secrecy was both shield and sword. And so, the nation lived in paradox, invisible dams building visible hope. A revolution that grew underground, one trench at a time. By 2025, Burkina Faso was not just thirsty, it was collapsing. That year, rainfall measured less than 740 millimeters, the lowest in a decade. Some provinces, like Udalin and Tapoa, barely crossed 500. For farmers, that number wasn't just data. It was death. Crops failed. Pastures turned to ash. Cholera spiked. In the north, villagers dug with bare hands for hours just to find muddy sips. In the south, cattle collapsed along dried riverbeds, bones jutting through hide. In Ouagadougou, mothers boiled rainwater scraped from corrugated roofs, if rain ever came. The United Nations called the Sahel one of the most climate-vulnerable regions on Earth. But for Burkinabe farmers, that wasn't a headline. It was breakfast. No water meant no food. No food meant no future. Between 2018 and 2024, over 1.6 million Burkinabe were displaced. Some by violence, but many by thirst. Entire villages emptied out along the dry corridor between Kaya and Fada Ngurma. Children left school to fetch water 20 kilometers away. Even the cities weren't spared. Ouagadougou's water treatment plants, dependent on shrinking reservoirs, operated at 30% below demand. With the capital's population nearly doubling in 15 years, rationing, black markets, and unrest became daily realities. Burkina Faso, once self-sufficient in food staples, was now importing grain from Ghana, Benin, and Ivory Coast. For Traore, this was the ultimate weakness. "If the rains decide our fate, then we have no nation," he reportedly told his ministers. And behind closed doors, officials used a darker phrase, hydro-exodus, the silent migration of millions, not by bombs, but by dust. Traore framed the crisis bluntly. "This is not drought. This is genocide by neglect," he declared. Climate collapse was not abstract. It was erasing communities in real time. The Sahel wasn't just drying. It was being emptied. That's why burying water wasn't cruelty. It was strategy. If Burkina Faso remained dependent on rainfall, it would die, not in a single moment, but in waves. First crops, then livestock, then people, then hope. By hiding reserves underground, Traore wasn't ignoring the crisis, he was trying to outlast it. But questions lingered. Was the water accessible in emergencies? Who controlled the valves? Could a country facing famine afford to keep its lifeline buried? To the thirsty, it felt like betrayal. To Traore, it was survival. And so, in the dust and silence of the Sahel, two futures clashed, the visible present of thirst, and the invisible future of sovereignty. August 2025. The Sahel sun was merciless. Across the cracked clay of northern Burkina Faso, every step was a negotiation with thirst. A boy dragging a yellow jerrycan across scorched ground seemed like the nation's portrait, searching for water where there was none. Yet at the same time, under secret orders, millions of gallons of purified desalinated water were being buried beneath the dunes. To outsiders, it was madness. To the thirsty, it was cruelty. But to Ibrahim Traoré, president of Burkina Faso, it was war. Rain here is not seasonal, it is political. The country receives less than 600 millimeters of rainfall a year. There is no ocean, no glacier, no sympathy from the skies. Wells become battlefields. Villages clash over a trickle. A dry month can kill a harvest, a dry season can starve an entire region. So why hide water when people beg for it? That question baffled international observers. But Traore was not playing by colonial logic. His vision was larger. He called it Directive 44B, the Sovereign Water Doctrine. It was not written in ink but in brine, not in speeches but in pumps, membranes, and sand. The project was known as Silent Reservoir. Thousands of barrels of desalinated water were sealed underground, wrapped in hydrophobic membranes, guarded against evaporation, theft, and war. Solar microgrids powered AI monitoring systems built by Burkinabe engineers under 30, trained not in Paris, but in Accra and Addis Ababa. There were no French contractors, no UN blueprints, no IMF strings. This was a homegrown doctrine. Water is not charity. It is sovereignty. The West called it reckless. But Traore saw what others ignored. Water will soon cost more than oil. Rivers will spark wars. Crops will collapse. The nations that bury water, not money, will rise. His policy was not about today's thirst. It was about tomorrow's survival. For centuries, African nations had been told that water was aid, something delivered in plastic bottles by foreign trucks. Traore flipped that narrative. He treated water like uranium or oil, a national asset to be protected, weaponized if necessary, and never left in the hands of outsiders. To the villagers still digging with bare hands, salvation was invisible. But beneath their feet, a hidden river of sovereignty had already begun.